March 1939, Mare Island Naval Shipyard, Vallejo, California. The hiss of acetylene torches filled the air, echoing across the cavernous submarine construction bay. Sparks leapt like fireflies, scattering across the steel hulls of half-finished boats. Edward Nelson, a 34-year-old welder earning $11 a day, stood amid the chaos, frustration etched on his face. Beneath the scaffolded decks, men twisted their bodies through tight spaces, threading bolts in suffocating compartments. Hours of labor went into fastening a single plank of wood to a steel frame. Watching it all, Nelson muttered under his breath, "There has to be a better way." He was not wrong. What he saw was madness. A process outdated by decades, strangled by bureaucracy and routine. The Navy demanded faster work, yet refused to change how things were done. Beneath the decks of submarines, teams of men labored for days, building and tearing down miles of scaffolding just to install wooden planking. Every bolt, every nut, every plank took hours. It was the same way they had done it since World War I, slow, dangerous, and wasteful. And as clouds of war gathered over the Pacific, America no longer had time to waste. Ted Nelson was not a college graduate or an engineer. He was a California-born machinist who had learned by doing 15 years in machine shops. 15 years understanding how metal behaved, how electricity flowed, and how problems could be solved if someone just listened. What no Navy officer knew that day in 1939 was that this frustrated welder already held the solution that would save more than 50 million man-hours and revolutionize naval construction forever. But Nelson's idea did not emerge from nowhere. It built upon earlier innovations from across the Atlantic. Back in 1915, during World War I, British engineer Harold Martin at the Royal Naval Dockyard in Portsmouth had experimented with a manual form of stud welding, fusing bolts to metal using flux powder. Patents followed in Britain and America by 1920, but the technique faded after the war, lost to economic downturns and the Great Depression. By the 1930s, American shipyards revived the concept, testing it in New York and elsewhere. Nelson, drawing on these foundations, envisioned a leap forward, an automated process that eliminated scaffolding altogether. What if instead of bolting wood from above and below, you could weld small threaded studs directly to the steel framework from one side only? He refined the method using a flux-filled ceramic ferrule to contain the molten material, preventing gravity from ruining welds on vertical or overhead surfaces. The process worked like this. A stud with a small aluminum tip is loaded into a spring plunger gun. When triggered, an electric arc melts the stud tip and the base metal in a fraction of a second, typically between 0.1 and 1 second. The ceramic ferrule shields the weld pool from oxidation, ensuring a strong fusion. No nuts, no bolts, no wasted days. Stronger than traditional fastenings, with tensile strength up to 80% of the parent metal. Nelson sketched the idea in his notebook and took it to his superiors. The Navy officers barely looked at it. "We follow procedures," one told him curtly. Another dismissed him outright. If it was that easy, someone would have done it already. His idea was rejected because he was just a welder, not an engineer, not an officer. Even when he filed a formal proposal to the shipyard commander, the response was a form letter. It thanked him for his interest and said it would take 18 to 24 months for Washington to review. By then, the war might already be lost. Undeterred, Nelson pursued protection for his innovation. On July 5, 1938, he filed his first patent application, United States 2191494, granted in 1940, describing the stud welder mechanism. More patents followed, like United States 2217964A in 1940, refining the design. That year, 1939, Nelson made a decision that would change history. If the Navy would not build it, he would. In the small garage behind his cottage in Vallejo, he cleared space, gathered scrap steel, and began working in secret. His wife, Emma, worried he would lose his job. "This will help the Navy," he told her. "They just do not know it yet." Weeks passed. Sparks filled the garage as he tinkered with different designs. A pistol grip handle, a spring plunger, an electrical trigger, and most critically, a ceramic flux ferrule. By late 1939, he had a working prototype. It performed perfectly on every surface he tried, horizontal, vertical, overhead, welding each stud in less than a second. When he showed it to fellow welders at lunch, they were astonished. "This will save us days of work," one exclaimed. But Nelson's supervisors still refused to listen, so he quit. In 1939, Ted Nelson walked out of Mare Island for good. "I am going to build welding guns," he told his boss. "And when the Navy comes back to buy them, I hope you remember this conversation." With $11 in his pocket and unshakable conviction, he founded the Nelson Stud Welding Company. He borrowed funds from a government loan program and began producing his invention in a tiny workshop. At first, no one cared. Most shipyards ignored him, but a few tried his gun, and the results spoke for themselves. Then came December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Overnight, shipbuilding became the nation's highest priority. Submarines, destroyers, carriers, all needed faster construction. And suddenly, Ted Nelson's phone would not stop ringing. Orders poured in. Kaiser Shipyards bought 50 guns. Bethlehem Steel wanted 40. Even Mare Island, where he had once been ignored, placed an urgent order. By early 1942, Nelson's factory could not keep up. He expanded to a new facility in San Leandro, south of Oakland. By year's end, his small team had grown to 150 workers, producing 30 guns a day and thousands of flux-ferruled studs. Every shipyard on the West Coast was now using Nelson stud welders, and the results were extraordinary. Submarine deck installation that once took 6 days now took 1. 3 workers could do what once required 12. No scaffolding, no wasted labor. The Navy calculated 50 million man-hours saved, equivalent to 19,000 years of work. By late 1942, Nelson's welds were proven to be stronger than traditional bolts. The Bureau of Ships, once skeptical, now sent a delegation to his plant. The officers presented Nelson with a citation for exceptional contribution to the war effort. He had done what bureaucracy could not, turned an idea into a revolution. Within 2 years, stud welding was everywhere on submarines, destroyers, cruisers, and the massive Essex-class aircraft carriers. Each carrier used around 20,000 studs. The process saved the Navy an estimated 50 million man-hours, allowing the United States to build ships at an unprecedented pace. Shipyards that once struggled to complete a vessel in 18 months were now launching submarines every 11 days. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard launched 4 submarines in a single day in 1944, a record still unmatched. The impact rippled across the entire war. Liberty ships, the workhorses of Allied logistics, relied on Nelson studs for deck fittings and gun mounts. America built 2,710 of them, averaging 3 ships every 2 days at the height of production. The United States Navy expanded from 7 carriers in 1941 to 99 by 1945, a fleet that dominated the Pacific and brought Japan to its knees. Every day saved in construction meant ships in the water faster, more men surviving, and victory arriving sooner. In May 1943, Nelson's company received the Army Navy E Award for Excellence in Production, a rare honor given to only the top 5% of war suppliers. His workers were celebrated as heroes of industry. He earned 2 stars on the award banner for maintaining production excellence through the rest of the war. The Navy's final report credited his invention with saving over 50 million man-hours, the equivalent of 19,000 years of work. But perhaps just as significant was who used his invention. As labor shortages grew, women flooded into shipyards. Rosie the Riveter became a national symbol, and among them were thousands of Wendy the Welders. Stud welding required little training, making it ideal for new workers. At Mare Island alone, 9,000 women took up torches and guns, welding studs that held together the decks of the ships that would win the war. When peace came in 1945, Nelson's company faced a new challenge: survival. The war was over, contracts were cancelled, and factories went quiet. But Nelson had already begun adapting his technology for peacetime industries: construction, bridges, pressure tanks, and later automobiles. His company thrived in the post-war boom. In 1950, he sold it to TRW, ensuring the Nelson name lived on. Over the decades, his inventions spread across every corner of modern industry. Stud welding became essential for building skyscrapers, bridges, and cars. The technology evolved, with computerized controls, robotic arms, precision electronics, but the principle remained unchanged. 1 stud, 1 flux ferrule, 1 spark, 1 second. Variations emerged, like drawn arc with ferrule for large studs, short cycle for faster work, and capacitor discharge without ferrule for thin materials. Today, it follows international standards like ISO 13918 for studs and ISO 4063 for processes. The same Nelson process is used in factories, power plants, and construction sites around the world, from American bridges to European high-rises and Japanese manufacturing lines. Even historic ship restorations like the battleship Texas and the submarine USS Pampanito rely on modern Nelson equipment to repair the very vessels his innovation once helped build. Ted Nelson lived to see it all. When he passed away in 1994 at age 89, he left behind a legacy not of warfare but of creation. His story is not about battlefields or medals. It is about persistence, about one man who refused to accept no for an answer. The Navy officers who once dismissed him could not see what he did. That innovation often begins not in laboratories or boardrooms, but in the hands of workers who believe they can do better. 50 million man-hours saved, thousands of ships built, countless lives preserved, all from one simple idea. Born in a garage, sparked by frustration, and welded into history, Ted Nelson did not fight the war with bullets or bombs. He fought it with brilliance, with stubbornness, and with a welder's torch, and in doing so, he helped win.